Welcome to Carnivore Conversations with Dr. Rob Kiltz. I hope you're enjoying the episodes. Today, I'm really blessed and to have Valerie Anne Smith, who's here to share her journey, which is a testament to her resilience, transformation, the power of dietary change in overcoming severe health challenges. She was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa at age 14. She endured a harrowing 40-year battle with multiple mental health issues, including schizoaffective disorder, clinical depression, anxiety, OCD, and body dysmorphia, compounded by extreme physical health issues. Despite numerous interventions, including inpatient treatment, psychiatric medications, and dietetic guidance that focused on a high-carb, low-fat, plant-based, her mental and physical health continued to deteriorate, reaching a critical point with the BMI of 11 and a weight under 80 pounds for most of her adult life. In 2018, at the brink of despair and after decades of suffering, Valerie's relentless pursuit of knowledge led her to explore the healing potential of a carnivore diet, focusing on nutrient-dense foods like beef, salt, and water. This radical dietary shift initially met with personal resistance due to years of conditioned fear and restrictive eating habits, gradually quieted the debilitating mental turmoil and reversed her numerous physical ailments. 6 years into carnivore journey, Valerie has not only achieved complete remission from her mental and physical disorders, but has also embraced a fulfilling life as a wife, mother, and health advocate. Her story, featured in the Journal of Metabolic Health, serves as a beacon of hope and a powerful reminder that sometimes the path to healing lies in challenging long-held beliefs and embracing the therapeutic potential of food. Really blessed to welcome Valerie Smith here today. It's really great to see you. It was so nice meeting you at Meat Stock this year. Wasn't that beautiful?
It was. It was transformational. I went there, already being healed 6 years.
Yeah.
And thought that I would have a phenomenal time meeting my heroes, such as yourself, and meeting new friends that became lifelong. But I was not prepared for just how life-changing it actually would be. It amazed me of just how deep the 4 days felt to me, and just how transformative it was. I was just blown away.
Was that your first event at a meetup?
Yes, it was. I have been wanting to go to carnivore conventions, KetoCon, all of these different conventions that are going on, and I've never had the opportunity to do that. Most of them are pretty far away from me. I'm in Ohio. So, they're in Austin, Texas. They're, low carb Denver. And I just don't have the opportunity to get on a plane and go. So yes, this was my very first one, and I'm hooked.
I've been going for a few years now. I think Low Carb Denver was my first, and I can tell you, I feel the same way. Many of my heroes, getting a chance to interact and meeting new friends, and really lifelong connections that help us understand what this is really all about, right? Like-minded people have experienced similar life-changing new findings in how food can transform all of us.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes.
Well, Valerie, we're here for about an hour plus or minus. We're open to back and forth. I'm really grateful for you to join our carnivore conversations and share your story. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners and those watching.
I certainly can. I have been healed of some very major illnesses, both mental and physical, for 6.5 years. And my life today is completely the opposite, completely different than what it once was. And I am not only thankful to be alive and now be active on social media promoting what healed me and what can heal mental illness and physical illness. And I am now a metabolic health coach so that I can work one-on-one with those who reach out to me who are looking for someone to be a regular coach to them and guide them into better health.
Tell us a little bit about your health history, your journey over your many years of suffering.
My whole life, I suffered. There are many people that look back on their life and they say, wow, I wish I could get back to how I felt in my teen years, my 20s. They have a time period in their life where they felt like their health was good, whether mentally or physically. And they look back on that time and either wish that it could, happen again, or they strive to get back there.
Mm-hmm.
My situation is prior to my healing, I never in my life felt well. My earliest memories are being 3, 4, and 5 years old. And I already was overtaken by anxiety and depression, night terrors, sleepwalking, crying daily, immune system issues, antibiotic issues. So I actually do not have a time period in my life where I can look back and say, that was when I felt good. That was when I had good health and then I lost it. I never experienced that. And as the years went on, the anxiety and the depression not only grew worse, but more diagnoses were added on to that. Wow. So by the time I was a preteen, onto the anxiety and depression was OCD that morphed into very severe later on. I was also diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and I was plagued from my earliest memories until 6 years ago with audible male voices that screamed at me 24 hours a day. There was no escape except for sleep. These voices screamed at me to harm myself and to harm my family and to harm others. I would slip into paranoia and into delusions and lose touch with reality. When this was going on at 12, 13, 14, I also developed anorexia. The self-punishment and the self-hate, I turned on myself, and it manifested in me as the drive to starve. And my goal was to be as skeletal and small as I thought that I deserved, and then eventually to not exist at all. And so all of this was going on at the same time. And I just descended further and further into madness. My family did what they thought was going to fix me. It was the early 80s. I was a preteen. I was not well. And they got me under traditional treatment, which meant primary care physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, inpatient mental illness wards, inpatient eating disorder wards, many very heavy psych medications were tried on and off over the course of 30 years with a dozen different psychiatrists. I saw dietitians, nutritionists. It was traumatic and devastating all steps along the way. The inpatient experiences were traumatic, were inflammatory, were not nutritious, looking back on it now, of what was fed in the feeding tube that I was hooked up to. It's soy, canola, and high fructose corn syrup. The hospitals pushed plant-based, no animal protein, carbs, grains, sugars. Gain some weight, will say that you're well and let you go home. this was just the backbone of what their protocol was like. And this is what I lived under for 30 years, continuing to try to get better, but getting worse every decade.
And the answer why this was happening to you was?
Part of the psychiatry was that it was childhood trauma. So we had a lot of talk therapy. And that was the overarching cause. But of course, after 30 years of therapy, and I had worked through all of those things, my mental illnesses were even worse. Nothing working through those traumas changed or lessened what I was experiencing mentally. And then the other portion of the psychiatrist causation was a chemical imbalance, and we have meds for that. So those were the only two options of why this was happening to me. No one ever addressed it from a metabolic brain dysfunction. No one ever addressed it from inflammation or mitochondria. No one ever addressed it from a nutrition standpoint. It was chemical imbalance and childhood trauma.
What type of physical ailments were you also experiencing, along with the anorexia and the psychological or psychiatric disorders?
I'm 5'9", and once I went below 100 pounds, and it got much worse than that. The first thing, of course, was low thyroid, low cholesterol, brain fog. I lost my menstrual period for a total of 20 years. Those were the initial physical reactions that happened. And as each year went on, each decade went on, and for many years, I was down to close to 70 pounds. And that brought on more issues. I was diagnosed with hypothyroid. I was diagnosed with severe osteoporosis, which eventually led to chronic bone pain, and I had 5 fractures within 5 years. I spent those 5 years in bed, housebound in my 40s, in casts, using crutches, wheelchairs, braces. I had a lot of medical complications, and I also had many major surgeries as the decades went on. I kind of coasted along in my 20s and somewhat in my 30s. But when I reached the late 30s and early 40s, my body just gave out. I had 7 hospitalizations within 15 years, some of them on the mental illness side because I could not function. And part of it was physical degeneration. I had severe sarcopenia, and I had muscle wasted to the point where I had multiple organ prolapses, which had to be correctively fixed with surgery. So I had many surgeries in that time too.
And any reproductive dysfunction? You mentioned you didn't have your periods. You're not able to menstruate, obviously, and not get pregnant, probably. And you had overactive bladder, and it just must have been horrendous.
It was, and several of the female gynecological diagnoses that I had that were severely painful, I was not given any hope. I was diagnosed with interstitial cystitis. I had vulvodynia. I had vaginal atrophy. These illnesses are just excruciatingly painful. They feel like bolts of lightning and shards of glass in the female area, and it never goes away. And the treatments that are offered are barbaric sometimes and very invasive. And in my case, they did not help at all. And no one ever mentioned what I was eating, my weight, my fat level, what I was eating, which was spinach and celery and very high oxalate plant foods. And that was all I was eating. Because by the time I got to my 40s, the anorexia, the first thing that went was protein and fat. And so for a total of 35 years, I had not eaten any animal protein, not an egg, not a bite of chicken, not beef, not butter, nothing for 35 years.
You practiced a vegan diet, essentially.
Basically, it was, it was certainly was not for the ideology, but it was a way to, I often even said that to others so that they wouldn't question it. It was easy for me to tell others that that's my dietary choices because it was from a standpoint of anorexia and self-starvation.
There was no link between your diseases and your diet.
That's what they told me.
Right. And maybe this is the segue into tell us a little bit about how you moved into the carnivore space and discovered carnivore.
In 2016, 2017, I was 46 and 47 years old, facing more surgery, facing a lifetime of fractures. This was at the 5-year mark of that 5 fractures within 5 years. I was teetering around 70 pounds again. When I tried to do better, it was with a bite of oatmeal or a bite of sweet potato. And then I would quickly relapse and go back to my standby of 100 calories of cooked spinach or a spinach smoothie. I just would do more celery, more spinach, more volume, more low calorie. And I knew that I was not going to survive another year this way. My family and I were hopeless and helpless, to say the least. It was a very difficult time for myself and my family that was suffering. So I began to look in other directions. I knew that I didn't have much left in me to fight, but there was a light within me. There was a light that my family kept flaming, that I had to try. I had to find something, and it wasn't going to be in traditional therapy anymore. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that was never going to happen with what I had experienced for 30 years. So I found a couple of books at the library by Julia Ross called The Mood Cure and The Diet Cure. And that was the first time I ever experienced and read that protein and fat had more to do with your well-being than just building muscle and just the lies we've been told that if you eat fat, you gain fat. She was coming from the standpoint that your brain needs protein and overabundance of healthy animal fats for your brain to work cognitively correctly. And I'd never read that before. I'd never heard that before. I took nutrition classes in school. I studied nutrition. I was a researcher. I had figured out how to reverse my daughter's Tourette syndrome 20 years prior using minerals and tweaking her diet to take away the things that were causing anti-nutrient issues. But I had never read that my brain needed meat and fat. So I continued to look into this. And this is when I found Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palmer. And then I found Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Anthony Chafee, and you. And I combined all of this research and all of this knowledge into that spark that was still in me, that still, even though I didn't want to wake up anymore, even though this life was not livable anymore, there was a tiny piece of me that still wanted to live. that
Hmm.
still wanted to be well. I didn't believe that I could be. I was hoping for 5% improvement, 10% improvement, just to get me through until life was over for me. And so I figured out how to do this for myself, knowing my propensity to relapse, knowing my history, lack of history with meat and fat. I figured out an organized way for me to what they call now reverse diet by adding in small amounts, small bites full every day. And then when I got used to it, build upon it. So 1 ounce became 2, and 2 ounces became 3, and 3 became 4. And I just kept going. This was not a time in history where people were trying to coerce others to do the lion way or the carnivore way and give it 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
This was going to be to do this until and unless. I did not have a timetable set for myself. I just kept going and I just kept adding.
Yeah.
So that first year, I did the lion's way. I did beef, salt, and water. I was learning about oxalates and I was getting an eye-opening wisdom of knowledge, understanding what I had done to myself potentially with all of this spinach and celery and beets and raspberries and chia seeds and sweet potatoes. I wanted to give myself the best chance that I possibly could. So that first year was very strict. I wanted to give my body and my brain the best environment to stand back and watch the power of the healing of our human body and see what would happen. And I am so, so thankful that at each stage, 3 months in, 6 months in, I noticed changes. 9 months in, 12 months in, I noticed more. And long story short, when I got to that 12-month, 1-year mark, my life was completely changed.
Wow.
The schizoaffective voices at the 6-month mark that felt reduced, felt like it was in another room with the door closed, quieted, but still there screaming. At the 12-month mark was completely gone.
Wow.
I've not heard a single voice for 6.5 years. The anorexia is completely gone. I don't have to wonder about relapses. I don't have to worry about triggers, about missing a meal and the next day I want to miss another meal. It's completely gone. The OCD is completely gone, which had morphed into very, very severe self-harm. I was cutting my arms and legs every day to deal with trying to say no to the schizoaffective voices that were telling me to harm others. That's how I dealt with not following through with harming others. I turned it on myself and harm myself. But that is completely gone. It's not a struggle. I don't have to tell myself to not do that anymore. It's completely gone. My anxiety is gone. My panic attacks are gone. My depression is gone. I live in overflowing joy and vibrant health every single day.
So you gave up plant-based diet and moved on to an animal-based diet. Was it a transition? It sounds like you at first didn't like the feel or taste of the meat, but you did a little bit at a time in order to gain the palatability, the taste. Was that the way you'd explain it?
Yes, it was a very slow transition. Having a conversation about it, and and in other interviews, I have gone into at length detail of exactly how I did this every single day to explain to other sufferers how they can slowly implement this, adding the foods that heal and removing the foods that harm. But for all intents and purposes, yes, it was a very slow transition. as I increased those animal foods and animal fats and then lowered the plant foods that I was discovering that were harming me. Yes.
So we can really look and say that the plants are, are toxic and poisonous to not only every cell of our body, but very much so the brain cells are adversely affected by the plants. And whether it's a direct poison, toxin, or there may be anti-nutrients, or it doesn't contain the most important nutrients that we need, which are in fatty meat, which contains the most abundant minerals, vitamins, in the fat, which is the building block and the fuel for our body.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's what I discovered.
And so you've gone back to any of your clinicians? Did that, as you were going through the transition, what was going on with them and working with you, or was it where you just had to move away and move over to another avenue of healing?
That first year, I had already moved away from traditional treatment.
Mm.
3 years, 6 years prior to that, my last psychiatrist fired me and told me not to come back. He deemed me as treatment resistant, as non-compliant. He told me that I needed to just accept the diagnoses, and this is just who I was going to be.
Mm.
He told me and my family to just accept this. This is what you have, and there is nothing more we can do. And I, at that point, was still on 3 very heavy psych meds, and I wanted to titrate off of them because I was functioning worse on them than I was off of them. And he also would not help me do that. So that was my light bulb moment that it was time to sever ties with embarking on finding another psychiatrist. I found a titration chart online and slowly took myself off of the psych meds. It took 3 years to feel like I wasn't medicated anymore. It took a long time to go off of those meds slowly. That first year of my healing, I did not see any physicians. I have since gone back to several of them now, and those clinician times were not favorable. They were condescending on their part. I thought that I would make a list of everyone that I had seen if I could find them, because there's been a lot in 40 years. And I thought I would go back through one by one and visit them and hope that they would be open to wanting to learn what healed me for their other patients.
Wow.
And after going back to 3 or 4 of them, I stopped doing that because of what I encountered. It was always one of 2 messages. One was, carnivore is only masking your symptoms. And the second message was, carnivore is just giving you a placebo effect. And at some point, you're going to have a psychotic break, and you're going to wish that you were still under medication and under treatment. And you need to get back in treatment and stop this crazy way of eating. You're going to harm yourself. So they were not open to my experience. They were not open to the miracle of my healing. And so I took my energy elsewhere. I took it to one-on-one working with people. I took it to the airwaves. I took it to anyone who was interested, and aligned myself with like-minded individuals and like-minded doctors, and got involved in any way that I possibly could, which is why over a year ago, I joined forces with Nick Norowitz and Michelle Hearn to be a patient in the Journal of Metabolic Health's animal-based anorexia remission case series. I wanted to do everything I possibly could do to show the world that freedom is real, and freedom from mental illness is real, but it is a metabolic disorder.
Dr. Rob Kiltz, another beautiful, spectacular day. And I just want to send thanks to all of those for watching the newest episode of Carnivore Conversations. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms to gain access to the full 1-hour episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come. God bless.